Tantor Audio presents Soarer's Choice by L.E. Modesitt, Jr. Narrated by Kyle McCarley. Green towers rise against a setting sun, proud monuments to choices ill begun, spare spires of eternal stone to stand, and long imprisoned spirits of the land. Alectors' choices fell on friends and foes. They struck with force, righteousness, and woes. Heeded not good or grace when day was done, and greater powers had turned stars and sun. 1. Dainyl sat behind the wide desk in the large study in headquarters. On the desk were stacks of reports. To his left, on the polished wood, was a shorter stack, the immediate orders he had written for the Myrmidons in an effort to undo the worst of his predecessor's plotting. Outside, the morning sunlight of late harvest warmed the courtyard and the blue-winged pterodons of First Company, those that were not flying dispatches and undertaking other duties. The solid granite of the courtyard and the walls sparkled in the bright sun, clean and crisp. He'd permanently reassigned the 7th Company of Myrmidons to Tempra from Dulca to keep them from being suborned by Quiverit, the regional elector in Dulca, and clearly the tool of Breckilt, the elector of the East in Alastra. After that had come the cover letter forwarding copies of Dainyl's appointment as marshal to each of the 8 Myrmidon companies spread across Corus. Beside those lay the draft of his report on what he had done to quash the revolt in Healt and Tempra. Of course, he couldn't tell the entire story because his superior, the High Elector of Justice, the most honorable Zeliert, had firmly ordered him to treat the matter as a local revolt, rather than the first thrust of a conspiracy masterminded by Breckilt. To make matters worse, and more delicate, Dainyl suspected that Breckilt was being quietly urged on by Samist, the Duarch of Ludar. Dainyl looked up from the various papers and back out through the window at the nearest pterodon in the courtyard behind the headquarters building, standing on its wide raised stone square and stretching its blue leathery wings. The long crystalline beak glittered in the sunlight. After a moment, Dainyl's eyes dropped back to the papers before him. Despite the proclamation that lay on his table desk and the green-edged gold stars on the collars of his blue and gray shimmer silk uniform that attested to his rank, Dainyl still didn't feel like the Marshal of Myrmidons. Add to that the fact that he was dreading the translation trip to Alastra, but the longer he waited, the more dangerous the situation became, and it wasn't something he could delegate. For one thing, he didn't have anyone to whom he could delegate the task. He'd been the sub-marshal in Elsene, and Colonel Denner, who had been the Myrmidon operations director, had attempted to kill Dainyl when Dainyl had discovered Denner's treachery. Dainyl was the only senior officer left in headquarters. The other sub-marshal, Alcina, was stationed in Alastra, the width of the continent away. For years, she had directed Myrmidon operations in the east, and she was one of the reasons Dainyl had to go to Alastra, and before long. He took a deep breath and reached for the next document on the top of the taller pile. In less than a glass, he was due at the palace of the Duarch in Elsene to meet with Duarch Kellerit to brief him personally on all that had happened in Healt and Tempra. He assumed that he would also be asked for his plans for the Myrmidons. That possibility worried him far more than explaining the past, because he doubted that it would be wise to reveal the reasons behind what he planned until he had a better idea of what the Duarch and those around him already knew. Still, he needed to finish catching up on the other Myrmidon and Cadmean operations, or as many as he could, before he met with the Duarch. He began to read the report from Colonel Harold, commander of the 1st Regiment Cadmean Mounted Rifles. When he finished, Dainyl couldn't help but frown. Except for 2nd Battalion, every battalion in the 1st Regiment was under strength, and the colonel was reporting that matters were worsening. And why in the Archon's name had a battalion been sent to Supat? The mines there were marginal. At least, he thought so. But it wouldn't hurt to ask Listranagh. As a chief assistant in the palace of the Duarch, his wife might know the trade and finance background. Slowly, he got up and headed for the records chamber. Doselt, the squad leader in charge of records, then jumped to his feet.
"Yes, Marshal?"
"Would you find me the records of and the orders to the 1st Cadmean Regiment that deal with the deployment of its 6th Battalion to Supat last season?"
"It might take a bit, sir."
"Just bring them to me. If I'm not here, leave them on the corner of my desk."
"Yes, sir."
Dainyl moved down the corridor to see if Captain Gassilt was in his study. Dainyl needed some help, and he needed it now. Gassilt might be out in the courtyard. He spent more time flying or with the pterodons than did many company commanders. Dainyl was fortunate. The captain was standing by his desk, holding a report, looking at it quizzically. He dropped it on the table.
"Sir? Gassilt, you know that we have no operations director." "Yes, sir."
Gassilt swallowed.
"No, sir." "No, sir?"
Dainyl couldn't help smiling.
"I'm a flyer, sir. I can't do operations and scheduling and paperwork." "Your reports are excellent,"
Dainyl pointed out.
"That's because I don't do them. Under Captain Zernaltar does. She has for years."
Dainyl laughed.
"I might steal her, then." "She writes well, sir. I'd hate to lose her, but she'd do better than I would." "Where is she?" "She's on the dispatch run from Ludar. She won't be back until late." "Would you leave word that I would like to see her?" "Yes, sir."
Gassilt sounded disconsolate.
"If she works out, she won't get jumped 3 ranks to colonel,"
Dainyl said.
"She'll be a captain and assistant operations director."
Of course, there might not be an operations director for a while, but Dainyl needed the job done.
"And you could still make major without doing much paperwork."
He grinned.
"If you can find another undercaptain who can write."
"Gonna's not bad. Cellistar's nearly as good as Zernaltar, but don't steal her. She's the best squad leader in the air."
Dainyl made a mental note to jot that down when he got back to his study. He could never tell when he might need another good company commander. He'd also have to check on Gassilt. He might be able to promote him to major anyway. The commanding officer of the Elsene Company probably ought to be one, and Dainyl needed a good flying commander and loyalty as much as he needed an operations officer.
"I appreciate the information, and, even more, I appreciate your honesty and loyalty. These days, it means a great deal."
Although Gassilt's expression remained politely attentive, Dainyl sensed the concealed surprise and gratitude.
"We need to talk, before too long, about what may lie ahead for you and First Company."
"Yes, sir."
Dainyl nodded, then turned and headed back toward his study. He didn't make it.
"The duty coach is ready, sir."
That was Under Captain Uasilt, the duty officer.
"I'll be there in a moment."
Dainyl paused. There was nothing he really needed in his study. He turned and headed toward the archway to the front entrance. Outside, waiting with the coach, was Wyatt. As always, the duty driver had a smile on his face when Dainyl strode out of headquarters.
Good morning, Marshal.
Good morning, Wyatt. The Duarch's palace.
Yes, sir.
Dainyl stepped up into the coach and closed the door. Once the coach began to move, he concentrated on how best to brief the Duarch. Some of that would depend on whether Kellerit wanted a private briefing or one that included other high electors. As the duty coach neared the Duarch's palace, Dainyl looked out at Elsene, a city built on an isle of stone and tile and gardens and trees, orderly and vibrant, with stone-walled dwellings set on tree-lined streets, shops with their perfect tile roofs set around market squares that held everything produced on Corus. Goods shipped from across the world flowed from the wharves and docks on the southern shore into endless warehouses and to everyone in Elsene, electors and landers alike. His eyes lingered on the twin green towers flanking the palace, soaring into the silver-green sky, gleaming and glittering in the mid-morning sunlight, symbolically crowning the accomplishments of the electors of Corus, who had turned a freezing and dying world into a place of life and achievement. Even as he marveled at the towers, Dainyl recalled the words of the ancient Soarer. "You must change, or you will die." That seemed so unlikely, yet the ancient had been so certain, and so melancholy in saying those words. The coach slowed and came to a halt under the portico at the main entrance to the Duarch's palace. Dainyl stepped out.
I'll be waiting for you, sir,
Wyatt called down from the driver's seat. Dainyl almost told him to return to headquarters because others might need him, but cut off the words before he spoke. There wasn't anyone there who would need the coach, not without a sub-marshal or an operations director.
Thank you. I don't know how long I'll be.
I'll be here, sir.
Dainyl made his way in through the archway, past the pair of guards armed with light-cutter sidearms. He did not recall the slender elector who met him inside the main foyer of the palace, although his face was vaguely familiar, but it was clear that the functionary knew Dainyl.
"Marshal, the Duarch is ready to see you, if you would accompany me."
He turned down the high-ceilinged hallway, flanked by golden stone marble columns that led to the east wing of the palace. The hall was floored with the traditional octagonal tiles of green marble, linked by smaller diamond tiles of gold marble, and dark green velvet hangings between the golden stone columns were trimmed in gold. The sound of Dainyl's boots hitting the octagonal and diamond-shaped marble floor tiles was lost in the expanse of the corridor. Near the end of the corridor, the elector turned to his right and knocked on a door. After the briefest of moments, he opened it and motioned for Dainyl to enter, then followed the marshal into the chamber. It was the same small library, 6 yards wide and 12 in length, where Dainyl had met with the Duarch on the one previous occasion he had briefed Kellerit. The inside walls held oak shelves filled with volumes, while the outside wall contained smaller sections of shelves. The narrow floor-to-ceiling windows between the built-in bookcases overlooked the southern sunken garden. The Duarch rose from behind his desk. This time, unlike the last, it was almost empty instead of being stacked high with books. Standing, he was an immense presence, close to 3 yards tall, with shimmering black hair and deep violet eyes dominating his alabaster face. He radiated talent.
Thank you, Barret.
The Duarch's voice was deep but warm. He turned from the aide to Dainyl and gestured to a chair set across the wide desk from him.
"Please, Marshal."
Dainyl bowed and seated himself. Behind him, the door clicked shut.
"Dainyl, first, let me offer my congratulations and my gratitude."
With the words came a feeling of warmth. Dainyl did not trust that feeling entirely, because he had no idea whether it was genuine. The Duarch was so accomplished with talent and shields that he could conceivably project the feeling without revealing what lay behind the projected emotion.
"I understand from what the High Alector has said," continued Kellerit, "and from what he has refrained from saying, that the incidents in Healt and Tempra were far more than the minor revolt that is the official description. I also understand that you had anticipated this possibility, and were ordered not to act until actual misuse of life force energies occurred."
Dainyl waited. He had not been asked a question.
"You are deferential, Marshal."
As I should be, sir. Would you like a fuller explanation of the events?
"I will request 2 explanations. The first will be a complete one, and that is for me alone. The second one will be for several other High Alectors, those of finance and transport, and the High Alector of engineering from Ludar. You will not tell them everything, and based on what you tell me, I will suggest what should go no farther. You may proceed."
Yes, sir.
Dainyl cleared his throat. Even though he had planned what to say, carefully, he was still less than sanguine about briefing the Duarch, because he knew that, despite Kellerit's immense talent, the shadow match conditioning of a Duarch resulted in blind spots and seeming irrationalities.
It began in early spring, when I visited Alastra, under the orders of Marshal Shastilt and the High Elector of Justice. There, I discovered a number of patterns, small things seemingly, that suggested all was not as it should be.
He went on to tell about Breckhilt's comments, what he had discovered about the substitution of key Myrmidon personnel, and then about the attacks on him, both by the regional elector in Dulca and by the then commanding officer of the 7th Myrmidon Company. He also mentioned the diversion of engineering resources at Fordall and the mysterious deaths used to cover up the details, as well as some of the attacks on him by the recorders of deeds, but only those that had taken place in the table chambers, and not those occurring while he had been in transit between tables. Those incidents would have revealed far too much about his own abilities.
And when Relin complained about a wild lander talent in Healt, but declined firmly any Myrmidon assistance, it was clear to me that we needed to move against Relin before matters became even worse.
This was when Marshal Shastilt ordered you to await further developments? Was that because Relin was regional elector and recorder of deeds in Healt?
I assume so, sir. Shastilt told me that to act immediately would be unwise.
What prompted him to change that decision?
That happened some weeks later, when I received a copy of a report from a Cadmean battalion commander in Healt suggesting that road-building equipment had been constructed and modified to be used against both Cadmeans and Myrmidons.
You received a copy directly? Is that not unusual?
It was very unusual. The Major had sent the original to his commander, as per regulations, but a copy to me. It was clear he feared that too much delay in relaying what he discovered would be unfortunate. When Marshal Shastilt read the report, he ordered me to proceed.
Dainyl went on to describe the use of 5th Company pterodons out of Derica rather than 1st Company from Elsene.
You did not trust your own officers, Marshal?
I trust 1st Company totally, sir, but it was clear to me from the beginning that Colonel Denner was someone's tool. I had absolutely no proof, and frankly I was less than certain about what Marshal Shastilt was doing.
As you, unfortunately, had every right to be.
The other aspect of the matter that was especially troubling were the weapons that were used by the forces of Regional Elector Farhilt. He had created his own regional force of armed and mounted rifles, using landers and indigents, and a smaller force of Alectors armed with light-cutter sidearms. The mounted rifle companies even had unmarked Cadmean weapons. Those I left in Cadmean custody, but the light-cutters were sent under seal to High Elector Elliot.
Dainyl could sense the Duarch's surprise even before Kellerit spoke.
How did that come to pass? Arming steers for use against Cadmeans, and Alectors with light-cutters?
The sudden chill in the library matched the coldness of the Duarch's voice, and the talent force of the Duarch felt strong enough to shake the entire palace. Belatedly, Dainyl realized that might have been a projection of an illusion, although he wasn't so sure of what had been real talent and what had been illusion.
That I do not know. I suspect that the light-cutters came from Fordol, and might be another aspect of the engineering problems that resulted in Zestafin's death. Fordol was certainly where the light cannon used in Healt originated.
How do you know those did not come from Fatel?
I don't, sir. But if they did not come from Fordol, why did someone go to the extremes of creating mishaps and deaths and trying to cover up the use of additional resources in Fordol? And why were there no such diversions in Fatel?
Why, indeed. Please continue.
It's likely that the unmarked rifles did come from Fatel, if Shastilt's and High Elector Elliot's assurances to me about the source of the unmarked rifles happen to be correct.
They were correct, and there were far more unmarked rifles produced than were initially accounted for, so you are doubtless correct in that supposition.
Whether the light cannon and the light cutters came from Fordal or Fatel, then their presence, and that of the rifles, suggests that either the High Elector of Engineering or someone high in engineering was involved.
That is doubtless correct, but you will not mention that in briefing the High Electors. Only note that the rifles and light weapons were present in large numbers in the hands of indigent steers who were rebels.
Yes, sir.
Pardon me, Marshal. Please, continue.
A smile followed the words, dispersing the sense of doom and chill.
There isn't much more to add. When I returned, Shastilt was so shocked that it led to his death, as I told you earlier, and Colonel Denner was so upset when I suggested that I now had proof of his treachery that he attempted to kill me on the spot with his sidearm.
Did you threaten him?
Only with the fact that I had proof. I did raise my shields.
And he added to your proof. Fatally.
Kellerit laughed, deeply and warmly.
Did Shastilt say much before his unfortunate shock?
He said it would be easy to prove that Submarshal Alcina and I were planning a coup.
He told me that you had gone to Healt without orders, and he was concerned. That seemed unlike you.
Dainyl wasn't at all surprised at that revelation.
He was the one who ordered me to keep everything secret.
That wasn't quite true. So had High Elector Elliot.
Why did you?
Because not doing so would have endangered the Myrmidons and Cadmeans involved far more.
So you put your people ahead of other considerations?
No, sir.
Then Dainyl shook his head.
Not exactly, sir. What I meant was that I might not have had the resources to deal with each problem had they occurred at once, which was likely if information leaked out before I could get the myrmidons from Fifth Company to Heald. We were able to isolate Heald. That meant the Cadmeans did not have to fight the mounted rifles from Tempera while guarding the perimeters, and that Fifth Company did not have to deal with the misguided orders of Seventh Company while subduing Heald.
Put that way, your actions are commendable. How do you propose to keep such misunderstandings from occurring in the future?
I had thought to promote Submarshal Alcina to headquarters, immediately, with a personal visit to Alastra.
That might be for the best, under the circumstances.
The Duarch tilted his head to the side, and a humorous smile appeared.
From what I have gathered, when one of the Fifth Company Myrmidons was killed, you took his pterodon and led the attacks. You were also instrumental, I understand, in keeping the casualties to a minimum in persuading Seventh Company that their orders were misguided. You also came up with a novel means of dealing with command in Seventh Company.
How had the Duarch known that? Dainyl did not reply for a moment, then managed to smile but slightly as he realized the source, belatedly recognizing a certain resemblance. Yet, if the Duarch were conditioned against receiving or reading any communications from his daughters, it had to be under Captain Asurk, acting under Captain Lyzata's orders. He risked a guess.
She is exceedingly courageous, sir, but I would not have guessed her heritage.
Say no more, Dainyl. Your thoughtfulness and courage are greater than any marshal in generations. Let us trust that they are sufficient for the challenges ahead, and that they will help us bring the Master Scepter to Corus.
The Duarch's face froze, if but for the tiniest fraction of an instant. Dainyl could sense that conflict between what Kellerit almost knew and was not allowed to accept. Even knowing that, Dainyl barely managed not to betray his total shock.
You look concerned. Is it not best that the Master Scepter be transferred here?
I am concerned, sir. I have done my best, but even so, much life force was squandered in the process, and you had told me earlier that the decision was close and hinged on the surplus of life force.
That wasn't quite what the Duarch had said, but what he had implied, and it was the best Dainyl could offer. Abruptly, the Duarch nodded, as if he had heard enough.
You did manage to minimize the loss of life force, especially by destroying hundreds of the rebel Alectors from Ifrin, who had no authority to be on Corus.
Dainyl kept his expression pleasant and waited.
All is judged on life force mass, yet today's measurement does not always reflect what it will be tomorrow, or next year, nor what a world will be, or could be.
Yes, sir.
As always, as with all those who serve the Duarchy and the Archon, you have not told me everything, have you?
No, sir. As I told you the last time you requested my presence, we would be here for days were I to do that. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have, now or in the future, or to provide more details about anything.
That you will.
Kellerit laughed, not quite harshly, but the laugh was followed by a sense of warmth.
How is Lystranar faring with your child?
She fares well.
That is good. She is one of the best chief assistants to any of the high electors.
So I would believe, sir, although I am less than unbiased. She would do well at anything.
You think so?
Kellerit asked, almost jokingly.
She has excellent judgment and can see much of what others do not.
All Dainyl wanted to do was...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?